Hey folks, it's your main man Sabado back in action. Welcome to the good life. Today I want to talk about a comment that I got from a subscriber and really go into detail because as I reflect on this question, I realize that as we talk about early retirement and we talk about the things you need to do to get there and all the steps and things like that, one of the things we don't really talk about are what are some of the specific things that I'm doing. And I talk a lot about how I'm spending my time, the different types of vacations that I go on, and things I'm involved with, like the Master Gardener program and so on. But one of the things that I don't talk about much is I don't really talk about what my picture looks like, some of the keys that I have, and then some of the areas of focus and what I have the money mindset. So today I'm going to talk to you about my investments, some of the keys to my own perspective, and some of the areas that I focus on. And I promise to not make this video too long. Before I get into that, I do want to introduce myself and welcome you to the channel. And if this is your first time, and if you've been here before, welcome back. I'm Sabado. I had the fortunate opportunity to find financial independence and retire at the age of 51. I'm 53 now, so it's been a couple of years that I've been able to experience this thing called retirement or financial independence. And so what I do here is I don't try to tell everybody that they should retire early, because I do recognize that there's a lot of moving parts that go into it, and there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of, and even emotionally, just getting your head around the idea that one day I'm not going to have to come in and go to work every day, but I just try to give it to you in a way that makes sense to you and where there's pieces of it that you can use. So even if your ambition isn't to retire early, you still might have the opportunity to live your best life. And at the end of the day, I say this now and I'll say it again. I don't expect everybody to retire early, but I do expect you to live your best life. And so my goal here is to help you do that. And if any one of you out there can get one piece of information that's helpful from something that I've discussed, and I've done my job. And that's really what it's all about. So I encourage you to subscribe. I encourage you to leave comments in the comment section. I respond to all comments, or I endeavor to respond to all comments. And what's beautiful about it is that a lot of times what you get is you get additional comments on top of the comments that help answer questions or give you additional perspective. So I essentially just become the catalyst for good information, and that's all we're trying to do here. So on that note, let's get into it. I have a subscriber named Coast to Coast, and he sent me a message, and he said, would love to hear about your real estate investments, finances. Are you gonna get more? Did you get it intentionally, or were you an accidental landlord? How does it help you or hurt your situation or stress level, and keep up the great content? So I thought that was a really great question, because it takes me away from the abstract and really brings me into some concrete things. So today I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about how I'm invested in my general kind of sources of income. I'm going to talk to you about some of the keys that help me maintain my status as a retired person, and that help me maintain my emotional well-being as a retired person and not be stressed out all the time. And then I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I focus on just because I don't want to go crazy with all the information that we have. So on that note, let's start off and get into it. So first I want to talk about where I'm invested, and I'll talk about maybe about 10 or 15 areas that I have different sources of income. And, I don't get into the whole passive income thing, because I think if you have to do anything for anything, then it's not passive, but sometimes you just have to work less and you get a better return. So I call that efficiency. Some people call it passive income, call it what you want, but that's what I'm talking about. So as we take a look at how I'm invested and where things sit for me is, I have 401ks and 403bs, and 401ks and 403bs are basically your employer-sponsored retirement plans. And the beauty of the 401k and the 403b is that when you have a 401k or 403b, your employer generally will have a matching contribution. And a lot of times it's dollar for dollar up to a certain percentage of your salary. My recommendation is that because the employer matches it, it's important to get as much of the free money as you can. And there's different ways to look at it. Some people say just put in the amount that's going to get you the match. But if you're like me, the reality is that if you're here, you may be looking for ways to just get started. So instead of doing that, put away as much as you can and put away up to the limit if you're able to do that. Now, some people can't, but if you're able to, put into the limit so you could get the full maximization, because at the end of the day, it comes down to time. And as the longer your time, the more money you have for a longer time window, the better off the result's going to be down the road. And the earlier you start, the better. And I had somebody ask me the other day, what would you tell a 25-year-old right now? And I said, invest, join the 401k, because through compound interest, tens of dollars become thousands of dollars, become hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then become millions of dollars. And it just grows on itself. We also have IRAs and Roth IRAs. Now, one of the things that I think is incredibly important is that when you leave an employer, do the research to understand whether or not it makes sense for you to roll over your money into an IRA or to keep it in the employer-sponsored plan. Now, in most situations, if you keep your money in the employer-sponsored plan, if you're up to a certain amount, you can keep it there. But sometimes there's a difference in the fees between employees and non-employees. So you just want to go into the least expensive option. If the fees are lower by going into an IRA, roll it into an IRA. If you change employers and you want to roll it into your new employer's plan, roll it into your new employer's plan. Now, that's one of the things that I generally recommend if you're going into another job, is to roll it into your new employer's IRA, because then you get the compound interest on the full amount of what you're invested as opposed to small pieces. Another nice vehicle is the Roth IRA. The Roth IRA, you put post-tax dollars in, so you get money after taxes. You put that in there, almost like a savings account. It grows, but you don't get taxed on the capital gains. And the two biggest risks, financial risk for retirees, are inflation and taxes. And so the less you could pay taxes down the road, the better off you are. And folks, I know you're not going to believe me now, but you're going to have more money at the end of your retirement than you do at the beginning, just because the way you spend, you're going to spend less, you're going to do less, you're going to be more conscious of what it is that you spend. And if you're invested with a conservative window, you're going to really be able to take advantage of those market swings. And so, and in fact, a lot of times what happens is, to manage taxes, they have what are called Roth conversions. And we did that this year. And we took money from one of our IRAs and we converted that into a Roth. Now, the problem with that is you got to pay taxes in the current year. But I just have a sense that the taxes in the current year are going to be lower than they are somewhere down the road. The other area that I have some funds is in a 457. And a 457 is a non-qualified deferred compensation plan. And here's why a non-qualified deferred compensation plan is important. With a 401k or a 403b or a Roth IRA, you have to wait until you're 59 and a half in order to take that money out without incurring fees. So you have to pay fees of, I think it's 10 or 20%, and then you have to pay taxes on top of that. Now, there's something out there called the Rule of 55, but I don't claim to know everything, and I hope I've conveyed that enough through these videos. But the Rule of 55 in some circumstances will allow you to take money out if you retire at the age of 55 and not have to pay those penalties, because 10% of those penalties, and let's say you take $4,000 a month out, well, 10% is going to be $400, and you don't want to pay $400 a month for your money. It just doesn't make sense. But the 457 allows you to take disbursements at a period of time that you choose. So, for example, I have a 457 plan that I've had from years ago. And because I was expecting to retire much later than I did, I didn't have an urgent need for it. So I said, I'll take it in 2026. And so now I have, in 2026, I'm going to get a certain amount of dollars every month until it depletes the plan. And the idea here is that I would have made money on the capital gains and I'd be able to use those capital gains. And this is all on a pre-tax basis. So I won't pay tax on any of the money that comes out from the 457. Oh, I'm sorry. It was put in pre-tax, and then I pay taxes when it comes out. And so the idea is to deplete the taxable funds first and then go to the non-taxable, because the taxable ones have the most risk. The other area that we have where we have income from is our pension. I have a pension. My wife has a pension. They're not huge pensions. At least mine isn't a huge pension, and neither of them are huge pensions. and but they give us income on top of investment income that we get from our employers, and it really makes a big difference. And I would suggest to any of you that if you're looking for a job, or you're looking for a career field that's going to put you in a position to retire, look at your state governments. Look at the, I want to say the federal government, but I'm just not going to go there right now because of what's happening to thousands and thousands and thousands of people with the government. But generally, state government, federal government, educational institutions, there's hospitals and healthcare generally will have pension, larger hospitals in some states. Now, some states, they don't have pensions and they're not going to have those. But in California, most of the major institutions, so like if you look at the Kaisers or the University of Californias and stuff like that. So if you have the opportunity to get involved, or even public utilities. So because if you have the opportunity to get into a pension, then that's money that can cover your costs. So the idea is for us, if we have a mechanism that gives us a clear and easy and guaranteed way for us to pay our mortgage and to pay for our food, then we're golden. We don't need much more than that, and we don't spend money on much more than that. And so pensions are incredible. We also have individual stocks, and I'm going to tell you something that goes against conventional wisdom, but I think it's important to understand how I've played this. So I have some individual stocks. I would tell people that it's important to invest in mutual funds. So usually when you go into your 401k, your IRA, your Roth IRA, your 457, you're going into a mutual fund. And all a mutual fund is it's a group of stocks that are all together in a particular fund. And what that does is that creates diversification of your portfolio. So you might go into, let's say, an exchange traded stock, an extra exchange traded fund, an ETF. And so an ETF tracks, let's say a Fortune 500, no, not Fortune 500, S&P 500 a fund. So it's going to track companies that track with the S&P 500, but it's going to be, a bunch of companies. And so sometimes some go up, some go down. So most of the time what will happen is a majority of them will go up or a majority of them will go down on any given day. But generally over time, in order to those funds, in order for them to make money, they continue to go up. And they have fund managers on the back end that do the work of looking at the fund, making sure the stocks are doing well, looking at the prospectus. And so you really have in the area of a mutual fund, you have you basically have somebody, an investment person that's working for you to make sure you maximize that fund. Well, when you do individual stocks, you don't have that. And what's interesting is that over this last year, the stock market did pretty well. So I in my stocks and in my 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, and all that, my return this last year, and it's not uncommon for a lot of people, was about 25%, which is great. But the stocks were only about 9% because, again, I was dealing with individual stocks. Now, those stocks ended up doing well because, again, some stocks will do better than other stocks. But instead of having it in a mutual fund where it averages out, either the stock goes up, the stock goes down. So I have some stocks that are in, let's say, energy that are doing really well, foreign energy that are doing really well. But then you have things like I have some NVIDIA, and NVIDIA has been getting hammered lately. I have some Google. I have Amazon. So a lot of the times, companies that we spend money with, I'll buy some stock in them just so I have a vested interest in how well they do. But I wouldn't put that as a major part of the portfolio. And the way that we arrived at getting or purchasing stocks was basically, I called my financial advisor during COVID and I said, I've always heard that it's better to buy low and sell high. Right now, the market's getting hammered. What stock should I buy? So what my financial advisor did is he gave me a list of stocks. And I mean, he gave me an exhaustive list. It was probably 25 stocks. And he said, and all of these stocks were dividend paying stocks. So these were all stocks that not only do you get the returns on the investment, but they also pay dividends. So when a company makes money, you talk about earnings per share and stuff like that, they'll give it back to the shareholders in what's called a dividend. And most of these stocks that we had paid dividends consistently for the last at least 12 years. And they're anywhere from 3.5% to 6% dividends. And what those dividends do is they pay out every quarter. and I reinvest them back. So as I continue to grow and the market grows, I'm not growing, let's say, on the $100 that I put in initially. It's growing 150 from the dividends that it's accumulated as well. So then it's almost double dipping and getting more bang for your buck. So that's one of the benefits if you go through if you take the individual stock path. But again, I would not suggest doing that for your entire portfolio. At least I wouldn't do it for my entire portfolio because, again, it's an incredible amount of risk, and you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket, because if you're like me, you're trying to make sure that you could fund your lifestyle from the age of 50 to the age of 100. Something else that we've had for a long time, and I know this was one of the questions that Coast to Coast had, was about the rental property. So back in about 2016, 2017, my wife and I decided to buy a rental property because, again, in 2016, 2017, the California real estate market was still slow to recover because it's so expensive out here, and the dynamics were such that it's just slow to recover. So I went to a different part of town where houses were less, and I had some money saved up for something else, and so I took that and I used that for a down payment on a rental property. We started the rental property as a tax shelter because we were able to write off a bunch on our taxes. Then what ended up happening was, over time, with rent increases, and again, I want to make sure that we're clear that we're not gouging anybody. And to just give you some perspective, the rent now is only a couple $100 more than it was back in 2017, and we do very, very mild rent increases because, for us, the benefit is having a good tenant, not necessarily trying to make a bunch of money on it. But now we make about $400 on it because we've been able to refinance. There's been some rent increases, and some of those other things happen that just normally happen to houses. And we have a tenant that's been in there since we've had it, and we're making about $400 or $500 a month on it. So it's a good investment, and we get tax write-offs from it, which is good because then we pay less in taxes. It doesn't impact us down the road, and we have an asset to show for it. Some of the other areas that we're looking to leverage, and we just can't now, is Social Security. We have a path where my wife is going to take Social Security earlier than me because if I take Social Security longer, or if I wait, then I get more money. And then what ends up happening is, essentially, when I hit Social Security, we get a raise. It creates a bit of a challenge for us because we then have income and will not likely have to dip into our investments to survive, assuming Social Security is still paying the same amounts. And, who knows what's going to happen there. And, if you have any magical insight, let me know, because I would be interested to know what you think is going to happen to Social Security. But I don't think it's going to go away completely, but I do think there's going to be some changes to it. But even in those circumstances, what's going to happen is it's probably going to either push out the age or just reduce the amount a little bit, because what they're not going to do is do something that summarily puts a bunch of people out on the street. I just don't see that happening. But it might, because some weird things are happening right now. And again, this is not a political channel. I'm not going down a political channel, but I do care about people. And regardless of what side of the aisle that you're on, there's some things happening to people that are upending people's lives right now. And I think, so I'll leave that there, but we don't know. Another area that we're invested in are tax-free municipal bonds. So you start to see the theme here where I talk a lot about trying to save money in taxes because, again, the biggest risk in retirement, it's taxes and inflation. And so I'm trying to hedge against my tax liability. And so the question becomes, is there a way to invest that's tax-free? And one of the areas are municipal bonds. So state and city municipal bonds, they grow at tax-free. And if you take losses, you can write those. There's what's called tax harvesting. Again, my financial advisor told me this. There's tax harvesting. So if you take losses on your investments, on your municipal bonds, tax-free municipals, you could harvest those together over a period of years, and then you could write that off on your taxes. And so it reduces your tax liability. And then when you take the money out, when you use it, that's also tax-free. So let's say it goes up 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15%. Then you don't pay on that coming out either. Now, the reason that everybody doesn't just go into tax-free municipals and pay for a bunch of city projects is because they grow at a slow rate. So the yields are low. They're about 4%. But what we use them for is we use those as a way to put away our long-term emergency fund. Because, again, people talk about having a 6-month emergency fund, and I think that's accurate and I think that's adequate. But where do you put that money? Do you put it into a bank? And here's the crazy part about it. If you put it into a bank, let's say you put $100,000 into the bank and it grows by $20,000. Guess what? You're paying taxes on that. Now, we do have a money market account, like a high yield money market account. But, again, it becomes a balance of the two, because you got the short-term savings that you're going to need in the event that something happens, the roof caves in or something like that. Then you have your long-term, where you may have to live for a period of time. And so this is an opportunity, again, to diversify. The key is saving money on taxes and diversification. And when you go and you talk to your financial advisor, the two things that you should ask your financial advisor is, how do I minimize my tax burden, and how do I minimize my tax burden, and how do I put money into places that aren't going to charge me a bunch of fees? Because you don't want to end up with a bunch of taxes, and you don't want to end up with a bunch of fees. So if you can mitigate that, then I guarantee you'll be happier when you get down the path in retirement. And then the last thing I'll mention in terms of kind of how we invest and how we make our money is in consulting. There's work that comes my way on LinkedIn. My old position, I was a chief human resources officer. And so there's an area of expertise in dealing with people and leadership and operational efficiency. There's just a bunch of areas that I get calls about all the time, or messages from people in LinkedIn saying some organization might want some information about different practices or different ways to get at different things and to do stuff. So I do some of that. My wife's done a little bit of consulting, and this YouTube channel. I do the YouTube channel, and I do it, and it doesn't cost you any money. It doesn't cost me any money. It gives you information to you. But I think there's something set to be said for not just investing in yourself, but investing in the well-being of others. Because, folks, I know some of us are in our 80s and 60s and 70s and all that, but some of us are in our 20s and 30s, and you're going to be responsible for taking care of the big guy in one way or another. So I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to get some of this information, and that how to, what some of those needs are, what's on the mind of people my age, or whatever the case is, or just helping the world and giving yourself a sense of purpose. But again, that becomes an income source over time, and it becomes something that helps build us into where it is that we eventually become, whether it's as an individual or as a society. So those are kind of the investment / where our money is side of the picture. So I hope that gives you a little bit of clarification. And, a couple of things that I keep top of mind is, when we were getting ready to retire, I wanted to make sure that I budgeted and use realistic expenses. It's easy for somebody to think that their expenses are going to go down 90% when they're in retirement. And folks, that's just not what happens, because you may not spend money on going out to eat. You may not be spending money on going out to lunch every day, but you're going to spend some money. So just be realistic. Take a look at what can you stop spending. So like work clothes, you don't need to buy work clothes because you won't be working. You're going to have to eat more. You'll be eating more at home, but you'll be eating less at restaurants. So you won't be going out to lunch. So you could take that off, but maybe you put more in for groceries. But the idea is just be realistic with yourself, so you don't find yourself down the road frustrated because you undershot what you thought you were gonna spend in retirement. And then you also, and it would be irresponsible of you, and I hate to use terms like that because it's not about that, but it'd be irresponsible of you not to take into account inflation and taxes as you're putting together your plan. Right now, our taxes are in a fairly decent place, I suppose. I mean, I don't know what good taxes are, but our taxes aren't incredibly high. But who knows where it's going to be in 10, 15, 20 years from now. So when you put together your plan, just make sure that you account for taxes and inflation. What do you anticipate with taxes and so on? And on that note, when you're putting together what you expect to make from your investments, what we did, and I suggest this for anybody, is I think you want to be as conservative as possible. When you're setting up your investments, be as conservative as possible. Now, you might be saying, Sabado, why do I want to be conservative? I want to make 20%. Well, the market doesn't go up 20% every year. And usually the largest returns in years of recovery before it gets to steady state and then drops again at some point. So on average, what we anticipate is we look at about a 4 to 6% return. So If we get a 4 to 6% return, we'll reach our retirement goals. Now, this year, I think I mentioned we're at about 25%. So when you're at a 25%, that's gravy. I mean, look, it's better. I would rather aim low and then get a big result. It's almost like I'd rather, I'd rather go to the casino thinking I'm going to lose $100 and then come out with $100,000 than go in with $100,000 and come out with $100. I hope that makes sense to you, but that's, if you think about investing in that term. So if you go 4 to 6%, because you're not going to get to, 80, 90, 100 years old and have over the course of 30, 40, 50 years, a negative return, and anything lower than about 4 to 6%. 8% is usually considered fairly conservative, but we went 4 to 6%, and we've been pleasantly surprised with the outcome. And I know we're going to hit some volatility here soon, but we're still up from where we were when we retired almost 2 years ago. And then make sure that your plan is one that takes into account how long you'll actually probably live. So I'll tell you something that I've learned recently. I've had some people in my family live a long time, and we never know how long we're going to live, but I'm aware of people that have lived a long time, and because they've lived so long, it tells me that because I'm fairly healthy, there's a good chance that I live a long time. So we put together a plan that takes into account living until the age of 99. Because if I plan to live to 99, and let's say I only make it to 80, then I'm going to have a whole bunch of money left over. But if I plan to live to 80 and I live to 99, then I might be broke, baby. So make sure you have a plan that takes into account realistically how long you think you might have. And I'd aim for the lowest returns over the longest period of time. Unless, look, if you've got, some type of chronic illness, or you have something happening with you outside of what, we're talking about here, then that's a different story. But look at your situation and make sure your plan takes into account realistically how long you think you're going to be around. And I know it's grim, I know it's gruesome, but I think it's something that if you do that, you'll be back on my channel in 30 years saying, Sabado, you were right. You knew what the hell you were talking about. And I think that'll be something that's incredibly beneficial to you. And so the last thing I'll focus on, or I'll talk about, is just some of what I call the money mindset, or some of the areas of focus that I have. And I'm only going to talk about 2 of them because I think there's so much information that, you could put in the comments somewhere if you want more information on a specific piece of it, because I could certainly do some research or tell you a little bit more in detail about my situation. But I do think it's important to understand just kind of where I sit in the money mindset, because I think that may benefit some of you. And so, a lot of us are thinking, we're never going to retire. And we say that without even looking at our situation, or looking at our habits, or looking at what's going on in front of us. A lot of us don't even know what we have in our 401ks. But I look at it this way. I live my life on the 80-20 rule. And I'll tell you where the 80-20 rule came from. When I was in college, I realized very early on that I probably wasn't going to be an A student, but I knew that I could get a B. If I got a B in a class, then I'd still be considered have done pretty well in that class. And so the need to be perfect really just would create anxiety. And I deal with, perfect A students and students that had a bunch of great grades and all those things. But the reality is they were stressed out all the time, and they weren't out hanging out. I was out partying. And guess what? I graduated with just about a B average, but I ended up doing well. And in fact, they say A students work for B students, and C students own the companies. So, which in my personal opinion, I think that's true in a lot of instances, because you got to be able to deal with people. And a lot of those people that were studying all the time are still doing the same things now that they were doing back then, because they didn't have the opportunity and give themselves the opportunity to spend a bunch of time with other people. But I digress. So when I look at the 80-20% rule, I always tell myself that, it's if I waited for everything to be perfect, then I wouldn't do anything, because the reality is practice does not make perfect. Practice makes improvement. Perfection doesn't exist. And many of us out there are thinking we got to be perfect. We got to have $1 million. We got to have $5 million. We got to have $20 million. We have to have X amount of returns. We have to have all these things. There's like 20 things that have to line up. But do they though? are the things that you're looking at to line up really things that you have to have in order to retire? I don't know. I mean, it may be the case for you, it wasn't for me. And even when you look at the 80-20 rule, one of the things that my financial advisor mentioned to me, I was afraid, what happens if I don't make it? What if I run out of money at 95? And I think I mentioned in another video that my financial advisor does what are called Monte Carlo simulations. And so what they do is they take your portfolio and they run it through a bunch of different market scenarios. I think it's 1,000 market scenarios, and they come up with a probability of you meeting your financial goals. And so there was a couple of scenarios. I think I was at 80%, 85%, and it's funny, I was at 80%. But he said, but the scenario showed that if things didn't go well, then I would run out of money at about 90, 95. So my financial advisor, so I said, no, I can't be broke at 90, 95. And my financial advisor said, by the time you're 95, you're not going to be able to do much. You're not going to care. So do you want to sacrifice the next 30 years of your life for 5 years of your worst years? I said, it makes a lot of sense. I want to be able to go out and do things now. I want to spend time with my wife now. I want to go out and have fun now. I want to be a master gardener now. I want to work in the community now. I want to do things now. I want to travel now. I want to have fun now. And I want to do that when I'm in my 50s, in my 60s, in my 70s, in my 80s. And then maybe in my 80s, I'll kind of start to slow down a little bit because I don't think I'll have a choice. But so by the time I'm 95, if I'm low on cash at 95, as long as I can pay my medical bills, which I should be able to do, and as long as I have a place to live, I'm not out getting 99-cent cheeseburgers at Jack in the Box, folks. I mean, it's just not the way that it works. So don't sacrifice the best years of your life for the worst years of your life. Now, there are vibrant 90-year-olds, and I don't want to hate on 90-year-olds because it's not what I'm trying to do. But there are generally not many 90-plus-year-old people that are out doing the things that they were doing when they were in their 50s. If you disagree, let me know. And if you know somebody's name, let me know, because I would love to take that information and put that on the channel and show others that, look, even Sabado is wrong on some of this. Not that I'm right 100% of the time, but about 80% of the time I'm right, because again, it's all about the 80-20. So focus on the 80% rule. Don't focus on it being perfect, because then you'll get an analysis paralysis and you won't do anything. And then you'll be 90 years old, frustrated that you didn't make any changes sooner. So make those changes now. Enjoy. Sorry about the fat finger, but something had come up and I wanted to change that out. So I apologize for that. The next one is, trust the process. Once you put together the plan and you're comfortable with the plan, trust me, at some point you're going to question the plan, because everybody questions the plan. Don't question the plan. Let me say it again. Don't question the plan, because the plan was thought through. You did all the work. You did all the rigor. Before I retired, in the last, 2 or 3 months, I've probably had 4 or 5 conversations with my financial advisor beyond our regular meetings, just to make sure that everything was where it needed to be. And since then, I've been fine, because the markets have gone up and so on. But it helped me build my confidence in the ability to retire. And so again, going through this time of volatility, I'm concerned about it, but I'm concerned more so because of my friends and family that are going to be impacted or potentially impacted, and less about myself, because there are things within my plan that hedge against that. The fact that we go into volatility, the pension's not going to drop. We have a couple of different investment mechanisms, but places. So we've got money in different areas. So if one area goes down, the other one goes up. We have an emergency fund, as I talked about a little bit earlier, with the bonds and the high yield money market that'll help us get through some of those times, assuming it doesn't last that long. But my point is that if I were to go back and relitigate the entire process, then it would create more problems. So that's where I think we can all benefit in setting the boundary for ourselves, so as not to get ourselves second guessing the process that we spent so much time in trying to figure out. So, but okay, so that's about all I have to say. Whoa, I almost fell off my chair. So that's about all I had for today. If you found this or any of the other content on this channel helpful, please let me know. Again, special thanks to Coast for the question. I love getting the questions. I love responding to the questions. I love thinking about the questions. I just ask that you send me some questions, leave them in the comments, and we can talk about them. So thank you, Coast to Coast, for the question. Keep the questions coming. Keep the comments coming. And all of you out there, keep the comments coming. And on that note, have a good rest of your day. Subscribe to the channel, and I will talk to you soon.